yeah, and I don't want to defend the guy. I mean, he's a bad guy. I mean, he's a
Yeah,
dictator.
yeah, no two
Um,
ways about it.
I just want to. I'm uneasy with the narrative that's being portrayed right now, um, but also pulling aside from the political science kind of aspect of it and the international relations and all that. It really makes me think about it in terms um, of the people and what they're going through. And so I'm a little torn and conflicted. You know, from a principled standpoint, my view is that we should be as involved as little as we have to in these kind of situations, because it's ultimately, from as an American, it's not our responsibility to deal with these kind of situations. But at the same time, morally, ethically, I feel like we have the ability to do so. We should step in and help. Just like I felt like we should have done more to help in Rwanda or help in Darfur or help in Kosovo, which we did in Kosovo, but those kind of things, or Bosnia during the Civil War. Um, I just feel
Well,
like there's a
yes,
lot.
it's a humanitarian crisis. So humanitarian aid doesn't necessarily have to come from a government. I agree with you. Private organizations can serve that function as well of aiding a country. We don't have to have a military action to sort of like, there's repercussions and, threaten them.
Mhm. Well, and there's you mentioned like non-government groups going in to help. A case in point is an organization called Mercury One. They set up a fund a couple of years ago called the Nazarene Fund, and I'm sure it's controversial because it was started by Glenn Beck. And a lot of people don't like Glenn Beck. I personally do. I think he's a good guy. I know a lot of people think he's like the devil or something, but um,
this, I have
we all
different
have our.
feelings. Yeah,
I'm sure you do. We should talk about that sometime.
that'd be a good
Um,
conversation, huh?
well, actually, I was
Not to
he announced
sidetrack you.
the. No, you're fine. He invented, or not invented, he announced the creation of the Nazarene Fund as a method of raising funds to, to find a way to help people who are being displaced and who are being persecuted and who are suffering under ISIS in particular at the time. But it's really kind of spread out over the last few years, it's like moving on to the refugee crisis and other things like that. Um, and I mean, within the first 3 months, we've raised $15 million. Like just that one audience alone, they've helped to relocate. I believe it was something like 4,000 people, Christians and Yazidis and other religious minorities who are being persecuted. Um, Getting them out of there, getting them to other countries, doing the vetting themselves, which is much more thorough than the vetting that was being done by the United Nations. Um, and I know Samaritan's Purse has been in Iraq helping. I don't know about Syria. Syria's been obviously engaged in a lot of other fighting, so it's not just been the stuff that's been going on in Iraq. But anyway, I agree. I think that it's important for non-governmental groups to be involved, but it's kind of hard to when it's a war zone like that. You have to be able to protect your people who are there. You got to be able to help in ways that honestly a
But
government
are you
has the ability
protecting
to.
your people by escalating the situation by attacking another military installation? I
No.
think you can argue that that's not protection. I mean, you can send troops to be on the ground for protection, but if you're physically attacking another country's and their protectors' military installations, then that's more, like you said in the beginning, an act of war than it is protection.
I'd like to know if this is I mean, this obviously is a very big humanitarian crisis. Why has there not been more heard from the United Nations as far as peacekeepers? I
Good
mean, this
point.
this war's been going on for going on 5 years now, 6 years now. Um, so it's just it's another question. It's like, where's the end? Where are their interests if they're not willing to get involved there? And perhaps it's a Security Council thing. Like China and Russia have veto power, and perhaps that's what's happened. I haven't dug too deep into that.
It does seem like something's missing, though. Yeah, I think you're right, because when we look at the refugee crisis with predominantly Middle Eastern countries, there's the United Nations and other countries, especially Europe, seem to be all over that. But then we have an issue where something like this happens, and that's not really being added into the conversation. It's not really enriching the conversation. So we're not hearing, what can we do for these people? How can we help them? It's more of just like, good, we got military action in there. We got strikes. This is what the press is telling us. So yeah, I don't think that retaliation is the best answer to something like this. Yes, it sends a message, don't do this. don't do that again. It's like spanking a kid or something, if you want to look at it from that perspective, but it doesn't de-escalate anything. We're talking about if you're spanking a grown adult, basically, so it's one adult spanking another adult, that doesn't really necessarily go over well. I wouldn't think, a kid you have authority over, but another adult, you can't really do something like that and expect them not to respond in like manner.